This is B.A. Nagesh, retired Additional Secretary and Team IAS Network. Today we are discussing a topic in GS2, sedition. So, see the question for discussion. The threat of sedition leads to unauthorized self-censorship and curbs free speech. Substantiate in 200 words. So, sedition, how do we understand this question? Sedition is defined in section 124A of the Indian Penal Code. So we speak about how this particular provision arose, views of the Supreme Court. Then what are the issues of concern? First we speak of what is this section about, section 124A of the Indian Penal Code. See, this particular section 124A of the Indian Penal Code was used by the British government to convict and sentence freedom fighters. So this was a weapon used by the British to curb the freedom movement in India. See, in the 17th century, the British lawmakers, believed that bad opinions were detrimental to government. So you cannot think of even criticizing the government. So if you criticize the government, it is against government interest. So they inserted section 124A in the IPC in 1870. That is to curb dissent. Now, what does section 124A provide for? Suppose you promote hatred, contempt, disaffection. All this gives power to the government to curb individual freedom of expression. See, you have individual freedom of expression, but you cannot use the freedom of expression to promote hatred or contempt among groups or disaffection among groups. So this is the background of section 124A. When we got freedom, the Constituent Assembly, there were a lot of discussions on whether this provision should be retained or whether it should be removed. So the opinion in the Constituent Assembly was this particular section, if it is used, it can be used by the ruling party to curb political dissent. So this is the background of section 124A of the Indian Penal Code. Now, what does the Supreme Court say about this matter of sedition? See, the very first amendment to the Constitution, Ramesh Thapar versus State of Madras, the first amendment, Article 19 refers to the 6 fundamental freedoms. So earlier the amendment came about to insert interest of public order. See, earlier it was security of the state, in the sense that if somebody expresses dissent, or if he works against the security of the state, if his freedom of expression, if he misuses it, security of the state, the government has all powers to take action against the individual. But the First Amendment changed the wordings to mean in the interest of public order. So in the interest of public order, the state can impose reasonable restrictions against the freedom of speech and expression. In Kedarnath Singh versus State of Bihar, the Supreme Court upheld section 124A. It said this section 124A can be invoked when there are acts involving or there is a tendency to create disorder, disturbance, or incitement to violence. So the state can take action against those trying to promote disorder, disturbances, or inciting violence. In the judgment relating to Balwant Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court observed sloganeering, which did not evoke public response, does not amount to sedition. See, what happened was in this particular case, there was a lot of sloganeering in the background of Mrs. Gandhi's assassination, the cries for Khalistan, lot of sloganeering in a public place. When the state of Punjab went to the Supreme Court to get to take action against the dissenters, the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot take action against the dissenters because it was only sloganeering. Sloganeering which does not evoke public response. It is not sedition. So up to now, what we have seen is Section 124A of the IPC, basically introduced by the British in 1870 to curb dissent, and it was used to curb the activities of the freedom fighters. And the Constituent Assembly did not want this. I mean, it felt that retaining this provision would mean that the ruling party can crush the opposition. It will crush political dissent. Now you see we examined the views of the Supreme Court. The first in Ramesh Thapar versus State of Madras, in which an amendment brought about. It replaced security of the state by interest of public order. So the state can take action only if public order is in threat. In Kedarnath Singh versus State of Bihar, the Supreme Court clearly said the state can use Section 124A of the IPC if there are acts involving or there is a tendency to create disorder, disturbance, or incitement to violence. These grounds, if these grounds exist, then the state can take action. Finally, we saw one more case in which the Balwant Singh versus State of Punjab, in which the Supreme Court clearly laid down that sloganeering without any public response, if there is no public response, sloganeering, they raise slogans and just disperse, this will not amount to sedition. Now with this background, we go to the issues of concern. Now you take the issue of sedition. So this Section 124A of the IPC. What will happen? We take the latest instance. In Bihar, the High Court directed the state government to file an FIR against 49 persons who signed an open letter to the Prime Minister expressing concerns over mob lynching. See, this is a very simple thing. 49 eminent personalities in Bihar had sent an open letter to the Prime Minister asking him to look into the issue of mob lynching. The Bihar High Court took upon this letter addressed to the PM and directed the state government to file an FIR against these 49 persons under Section 124 of the, that is promoting sedition. So this, you can see the extent to which this particular section can be stretched. Another thing would be deterrent against criticism. This particular section 124A is a deterrent. People may be afraid to speak anything against the government. So even if they have to criticize, they are afraid if the government can take action against them under Section 124A. Now we need to look at the provisions, relook at the provisions. See, UK, which inserted this particular clause relating to sedition, has abolished it now. This provision was inserted by the British government when it ruled India, and now the present British government has abolished it. So do we need to have this provision at all? So the policymakers need to have a relook at this. Finally, what I would like to say is, it is the time for people and civil society to challenge the law, the Section 124A. Now, right to dissent should become a part of the right to freedom of speech and expression. Now, the Part 3 of the Constitution provides for right to freedom of speech and expression. Now, the right to freedom of free speech and expression should also include the right to express dissent. This should become a part of the right to freedom of speech and expression. The policymakers and the rule makers should see that right to dissent should be made a part of the right to freedom of speech and expression and should not view it as a weapon to curb dissent. So in this particular question, we analyzed the background of section 124A. Then we saw the views of the Supreme Court. We took the three views: Ramesh Thapar versus State of Madras, Kedarnath Singh versus State of Bihar, Balwant Singh versus State of Punjab. We examined the issues. Finally, when coming to the issues of concern, we examined how the section provides draconian powers to the state. See how when 49 eminent citizens in Bihar write an open letter to the PM expressing their concern over mob lynching, the Bihar High Court suo moto took notice of that and asked the authorities in Bihar to file an FIR against the 49 persons under section 124A of the IPC. So this is the limit to which this section can be stretched and how the state can become a super state only by virtue of this particular section. Then as I also draw another issue which I expressed, deterrent against criticism. Now everybody will be scared to speak against the state. Whatever you speak, you have the fear that you could be, the state can pick you up under section 124A. Finally, we also said how when the provision is abolished in the UK which had this provision for a very long time, now has scrapped it. Why can't the policymakers take the UK example and also do away with this? Finally, we said how right to dissent should become a part of the right to freedom of speech and expression. So when an individual is guaranteed fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Constitution. Article 19, we speak of 6 fundamental freedoms. The first is right to freedom of speech and expression. So what the lawmakers, the policymakers should consider is why not the right to dissent become a part of the right to freedom of speech and expression. So this is very apt. Once the right to dissent becomes a part of the right to freedom of speech and expression, only then the fundamental rights, the meaning of the fundamental rights to personal freedoms becomes complete. Otherwise, the threat of sedition, which is laid out in section 124A of the IPC, it leads to unauthorized self-censorship and it curbs free speech, thereby violating the fundamental rights laid down in Part 3 of the Constitution. So this is the discussion we had on a question relating to GS2 polity. We spoke of sedition, how the clause needs to be abolished, and how if the section is retained, it can lead to the emergence of a draconian state, a superpower state, where everybody is scared to criticize, the government. It will lead to unauthorized self-censorship, and free speech and expression gets limited or gets curtailed by the actions of the state. Thank you.